Hello and welcome to the Stamperia Coffee and Chocolate mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. If you are just joining the series, all of these products that I'm using here are linked in the description box below to the Scrap and Create website, where you can just click on those products to follow along. In this video, we're going to begin building the cover and the base pages for our album. So to start with the cover, you will need 2 pieces of heavyweight cardstock cut to 10 1/4 by 7 3/4. And then 1 piece for the spine that measures 2 1/4 by 7 3/4. Now I'm making my pages really thin. There's not going to be a lot of bulk and a lot of embellishments, so I'm using a 2 1/4 inch spine. If you decide that you are going to want to embellish your pages more, you might want to expand this to 2.5 inches and adjust your measurements accordingly. We're going to cut 2 pieces of cardstock. These are just 11 inches by 8.5 inches. And on both of them, I have measured up 3/8 of an inch from the bottom edge, and I've drawn a vertical or a horizontal line. So I've done that on both of my pieces. Next, I have 1 piece that measures 4 1/4 by 8.5, and I have 1 piece that measures 4 1/4 by 7 5/8. We're going to start with one of our 8.5 by 11 sheets and our cover. We're going to use this horizontal line as a way to place this on the page so that it is in the center. So we're going to have a small border around the entire piece. Now I use my tacky glue for this. If you prefer to use double-sided tape, it's okay to do that too. But you want to make sure that you have this covered with your adhesive, and then we're going to place this on the page. I'm going to use my line as a guide for where to place this, just so that it is pretty centered on here so that there's enough of my cardstock around the entire piece. Now, if you want more around your piece, you would need to use a 12 by 12 paper to be able to have more that's going to wrap over the edge. But this is enough. It will cover those edges, and that's all we need it to do. I'm going to take my second piece of cardstock and my second cover, and I'm going to repeat that process. Now that I have my chipboard on my pieces, I'm going to miter my corners. So I need to leave some room past my corner so that it will wrap. So you don't want to cut it directly to the corner. You want to leave about 1/8 of an inch past your corners so that it will completely wrap that corner in cardstock when we fold those edges over. I'm going to do this with both of my pieces. Now I like to fold my edges over first, and then I will actually adhere them down. So I'm just going to fold these, and once I get them folded over, I use my bone folder to make sure that this is nice and tight and crisp up against my edge, and then fold it over the top of the chipboard too. So I'm going to go around my entire piece, just folding these edges, creasing them to make sure that it's a nice tight fold. Once I have my folds done, I'm going to start, I always just start with the shorter edges. I'm going to add my adhesive here to the inside of my little tab section. Then I'm going to flip this up over and adhere this down. Now because it is a little bit smaller, it does take a few seconds for the adhesive to grab and stick, so just be patient. Then I'm going to bring my bone folder along the edge and make sure again that it's nice and crisp, so there's not any puckers or gaps in there. And I will repeat that on the other short side. And now I need to tuck these corners around so that these little edges wrap the chipboard. So what I like to do is take my bone folder and then press in on that so that it wraps that corner. So I just come down and press in and it will wrap that corner. Then whenever I do this, that corner will be completely wrapped with my cardstock. So I'm going to take my adhesive here and apply it on one of these longer tabs. And just like the shorter tabs, I'm going to wrap this up and over that edge. And now I will do the same thing with the final side. So now that I have all 4 edges covered, my first cover is finished. I'm going to do the same thing with my second cover, but I'm going to do this off camera since it's the same process as the first. Then I'll come back and show you how to wrap the spine. To start with the spine, you need the 4 1/4 by 8 1/2 piece. I did draw a line here as well, 3/8 of an inch up, just so that I know where to place my spine. And I'm going to be placing this in the center so that there are flaps on each side. Just like with the covers, I'm going to place my adhesive on the entire back side of my spine section. Now I'm going to place this right in the center from left to right, and then using my line that I placed on here to make sure that it is centered from top to bottom. And then I am going to burnish this down with my bone folder. And now I'm going to take my edge on top and bottom and I'm going to wrap it around. And I'm going to first wrap the center piece, and then I'm going to hold this and I'm going to take my bone folder right off the edge and I'm going to press that cardstock right up against the edge and then down flat. And what's going to happen, hopefully you'll be able to see this, it will actually angle that cardstock just a little bit here down because it's wrapping that paper around that edge. And that's what we want, is that slightly downward angle. So hopefully when I put it like this, you can see that they go slightly down. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other edge. And I'm just wrapping this, pressing down. And I found the easiest way is just to press your bone folder down, get that nice crease against the edge, and then smooth it out. Now I'm going to open both of those up and I'm going to apply my adhesive to this entire section. And now I'm going to smooth this over into the center, making sure it's nice and flat. Then I'm going to do exactly what I just did, pressing that right against the edge and then pressing these little wings down flat. And then I'll do the same thing on the second side. Now that I have those top and bottom edges wrapped, I'm going to flip this over on the opposite side, and I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to run it up each of the sides to crease the paper around those edges. So now when I turn it back over, it is flat. If you look at it like this, these tabs are flat with the spine piece. So this is ready for those two covers. So I'm going to bring my covers in and we are going to place these together. I'm going to use my ruler to make sure that these are lined up flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply adhesive on this entire section here. I do not want to go past that nice crisp line, but I do want my adhesive to be right up against that line. I'm going to use my ruler to set this on so that I can just line these straight up. So I'm going to place my cover right next to the spine piece. There doesn't need to be any type of gap like you would if you were wrapping this completely. This is called the lay flat method. And I'm pressing these both down so that they are straight across. And then I'm going to burnish this down. Now I'm going to flip this over and burnish down on this side. And we have the first side done. So I'm going to flip this over and now I'm going to apply my adhesive to the opposite tab. Once again, I'm going to use my ruler to make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. And I'm going to place the second cover right down next to that spine piece, pressing everything up against the ruler. And now I'm going to burnish this down. Then I'm going to flip this over and burnish from the inside. Taking the final piece that you have left, it is 4 1/4 by 7 5/8. This is going to go here right over top that spine piece. So it's the same width this way, so you just line that up, and it's slightly smaller. It's 1/8 of an inch smaller, top and bottom, so you're just going to place this in the center here. Now on this piece, you want to make sure that you have really even coverage with your adhesive. So if you are using your wet adhesive like I am, just make sure that everything is nice and coated, but you don't want too much, that way it doesn't warp. But if you don't have enough, then this could not stick right, and when your hinges are on there, they will actually come off of the actual spine piece. So just be really careful with your adhesive here. Once I have all of my adhesive on, I'm just going to go ahead and line this up side to side and center it top to bottom, and then I'm going to burnish this down. Now I'm going to leave this to dry like this. I'm not going to fold this yet. I want to make sure that everything is nice and dry. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to move on to make the hinges. For the hinges, you need to cut one piece to 2.5 inches by 7.5 inches and one piece to 3.5 inches by 7.5 inches. Now for each of these pieces, you're going to score on the short sides 1/2 inch along the entire section. So 1/2 at 1, at 1.5, and 2. And then same thing on the 3.5 inch side, every 1/2 inch, scoring this piece. Before I do anything else, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to miter just the end 1/2 inch sections from the first score line to the end of the page on both of these hinges. Next, I'm going to take my bone folder. I always start in the middle. I'm going to fold over, hold in the center, make sure that this is lined up here so that it's nice and straight, and I'm going to burnish this. And I'm going to burnish this on all of my score lines in the same way. And I like to start in the center and smooth outward so that this stays a nice straight fold. If you start here, sometimes by the time you're done, it actually causes that paper to shift and it doesn't always stay flat or straight. So I just decided that I would do it from the center, and when I do that and hold my paper, I figured out that it doesn't move and it stays exactly where I want it to, and then my folds are nice and crisp. Once I have my folds in one direction, I'm going to flip over and I'm going to burnish in the opposite direction on all of these lines. I'm going to repeat that process with the second hinge as well, just folding on all of my score lines in both directions, and then I will come back and show you the next step. Since I am inking all the edges of my pages, I'm going to go ahead and start inking these. And what I'm going to do, actually, I'm not going to ink these edges because the pages will be there, but I'm going to ink these ones, and then I'm going to actually go into my folds here, and I'm going to ink these because these will be seen. So I'm going to take a second to do that, and I am going to ink on both sides because you will see both sides of most of these hinges. I have my cover in here. I did ink around the edges of my cover, but I'm going to actually fold this cover now. So I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to crease this as I bend this cover up. And I'm going to fold that over. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side, using my bone folder to crease this and then flip this up. Now, before I forget to do this, I'm going to just go ahead and ink the edges on my spine piece. Now that I have the spine pieces bent and inked, I'm going to take my centering ruler and mark here in the center. So these 3 sections of this are going to be attached to my spine. So this is 1.5 inches. My spine is 2 1/4. If you made yours larger and it's 2 1/2, you need to make sure that you do this so that it's in your center. But I'm going to measure over 3/4 of an inch from the center. And I'm going to just put some marks on the paper. I can erase them later. And now I'm going to take my larger of my 2 spine pieces, fold 2 over, fold 2 over, and now I have my 3 in the back. I'm going to apply my adhesive to all 3 of these sections, and I'm going to adhere this down first to my spine piece. And this is where you want to make sure that you do have this entire piece covered, because like I said before with that last piece we put down, if you don't have all of this covered, there is a chance that it could lift off of the spine once your pages are attached. Once I have my adhesive on, I'm going to take this and I'm going to set this right between those marks that I made on top and bottom, and then making sure that it's also centered. So there's about 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom. And now I'm just going to adhere this down. So only those middle 3 should be attached to the spine. So if I flip up, this will be the hinge for the 4th page. And then if I flip the first one up, this will be the hinge for the 1st page. Now I'm going to take the smaller hinge and find just that middle 1/2 inch section and apply my adhesive to this section. Now I'm going to put this in the center of those 3 pieces already attached to the spine. I'm going to fold 1 over so I can make sure that I'm lining up my score lines appropriately. Press this down and then holding this, make sure if I flip the other over, it's lined up too. And now I'm going to go ahead and burnish this. So now I have all 4 of my hinges for my pages, and I have my cover complete. Next, we're going to move on to making the 4 base pages for the inside of the album. To begin making the base pages, we're going to cut 4 pieces that measure 9.5 by 8.5. Now I'm going to turn this on the 8.5 inch side. I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch and at 8 inches. Then I'm going to take my scissors and miter these ends on the 1/2-inch tabs on all of my pieces. Then I'm going to cut 4 more pieces that measure 11 inches by 7.5 inches. Now on the 11-inch side, I'm going to score this at 9.5 inches. Starting with the 11 by 7.5 inch piece, we've scored this here. I'm going to fold this back and use my bone folder to lay flat. I'm going to do this to all 4 of my pieces, which I have already done here. Then for my 9.5 by 8.5 inch piece, I'm going to fold my 1/2 inch tabs back and use my bone folder to crease these down so that they are nice and flat. The flatter these lay, the better your pocket pages will be when you put them together. So I try to make sure that I adhere these down, or I crease these down as much as I possibly can so that my pockets are tighter. So I've got that and my other 3 all the same. So I've got my 4 fronts and my 4 backs. Next, I'm going to put my pages together. So this will be my page front and this will be my page back. So I'm going to have this piece with the little kind of tabbed or flap section on my left side. What I'm going to do here first, I'm going to do these one at a time. If you want to do them both at the same time, you can do that. But I'm going to place my adhesive here on this 1/2 inch tab. If you are new to album making, be careful with how much adhesive you put on here. You don't want a lot of adhesive because that will warp your paper, but you want enough that this will stick firmly. I'm going to line up my top edge and my sides here. Then I'm going to press this down and use my bone folder to burnish it. But I need to make sure mine moved, so I need to make sure it is in place. And then hold this down and adhere this together. Once I have my first side adhered, I'm going to open this up and place my adhesive on my second 1/2 inch tab. And then I'm just going to close my page up to form that pocket. But I want to make sure that it is nice and tight and straight when I do this. So I'm going to turn it this way and I'm going to press up from the bottom, making sure that everything does line up, and then adhere this down. So now we have our pocket page. Flipping over, the back side will have this little tab on it. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the other 3 bases to create 4 of these pages. For my pages, I've marked them page 1 front, page 1 back. I'm going to show you because I've actually changed the way my pages fall. So page 1 front, page 1 back has this little flap on the left-hand side. Page 2 front, page 2 back has the little flap on the right-hand side. Then page 3 front, page 3 back has the flap on the left. And then page 4 front, page 4 back has the flap on the right. Now I'm showing you this because for the next step, it's going to matter which side your flaps are on. So you want to make sure you have your pages correctly laying the order that you want them in. I'm going to be using my envelope punch board from We Are Memory Keepers to do this step. If you don't have one of those, you can use a circle punch as well. And what I'm going to do is notch here so that you know where to pull the photo mat in and out. And how I'm going to do this is 7.5. So I need to, the center of this is going to be 3 3/4. So I'm going to place this in here at 3 3/4 and punch this. So now I have my little notch where you will be able to see the photo mat in here. And on this side, you also be able to see it here. So whether I leave this as a flap or I make this a tuck spot or a pocket, we'll decide later, but you'll still be able to see that photo mat here in that main pocket. So I'm going to do the same thing, and that's why this is important, because I'm going to be doing this one here and it's not going to be in this flap. So you need to make sure that you decide which side you want those flaps. If you want them all to be on that same side, that's perfectly fine too. Just make sure that you have your pages correctly laying whenever you do this step. So now I'm back with my flap on this one. And if you were using the circle punch, you're just going to measure where it is, take your circle punch halfway in, and then use your circle punch to cut a half circle there. If you don't have either of those things, you can notch it with scissors, or you can leave this out if you don't want to do this either. It's completely fine for you to do this however you want for your album. Once those pages are notched, I'm going to go ahead and take my Walnut Stain ink and I'm going to start staining these, or distressing all of these edges here before I move on to the next step. Now, I'm not going to be doing any of this inking on camera when I do the rest of this throughout the album. So whether it is my Kraft cardstock pages and flaps and pockets, or whether it's the decorative paper when we get to that, I will do this off camera because it takes up a lot of time and it's not really the most interesting thing to see and watch someone ink pages. So each time you do some type of element with your craft paper, you can go ahead and ink those edges, or each time you use the decorative papers, once we cut those too, you want to ink your edges. I will probably not tell you every single time to ink your edges, so you just want to make sure that you remember to do that on your own. Now, I am doing this full one on camera just to kind of show you how I go about this. You can make yours darker than mine. You can make yours lighter than mine. You can use a different color. You can completely skip this if you don't like this step. So it really just kind of depends on your own preferences here. I'm going to lift up this flap and get here as well. Then I'm going to open this. I haven't decided if this is going to be some type of flap or if it's going to be a pocket. So I'm just going to ink all of those edges for now. So I have all of my edges inked on my first page, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the remaining 3 pages. Now that I have all of my base pages inked, we are finished with this video. In the next video, we will begin building up each of these base pages individually using more of our craft cardstock. So I hope you'll stay tuned. See you in the next tutorial.